I got my superstar panel with me, Attorney Milton Grimes, superstar lawyer at LA, Representative Rodney King, of course, the crack research analyst of Vanita Banks out of Chicago, masters in tax, cybersecurity experts, and we got a handful of subjects to discuss today. First of all, I'd like to congratulate all those folks who went to church last Sunday. It was enlightening to see so many folks going to church. I think it's a good thing. And hopefully you join us again, too, particularly at my church. Before I get started, there was a mass shooting downtown Indianapolis, and it made national news. We had teenagers, well, I guess 11, 12-year-olds may not necessarily be teenagers, but young kids engaged in conduct that resulted in 7 kids being shot downtown Indy. And so it leads us into our first topic in terms of parental liability. Kids with guns, folks, is a bad idea. And so the question becomes, to what extent should parents be held liable for misconduct of their children, particularly when it involves deadly force or the potential for deadly force? We'll start off there because I know Attorney Banks will talk about the Michigan case. The parents were both been found guilty. They both going to be sentenced and look like they're going to get a lengthy sentence. What are your thoughts? Attorney Banks? Okay.
Good morning, Attorney Lee. I had a little problem coming off mute there. And good morning, Attorney Grimes. Well, both parents in the Michigan case have been found guilty of 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter, and they could be sentenced to up to 60 years in prison. They were found to be grossly negligent in allowing their son to have a gun, number 1, and 2, they ignored signs of his down spiraling mental health, resulting in 4 students being killed and 7 others were injured. And so they will be sentenced on next Tuesday of next week. And so we'll see what happens. They've been jailed since December 2021, and they are looking at a long prison term. Attorneys for the parents are asking for house arrest and time served, but it appears that we'll see, they may receive a lengthy prison term as a result of the actions of their son.
Also, for our community folks and all our station, our call-in numbers 833-653-3529, 833-653-3529. Okay, Attorney Grimes.
Yes, sir.
We got a mass shooting. We got to do something about it.
Yeah. And I believe if you commit a crime, you do the time, Nate, in theory, but we don't know the degree of responsibility of each parent. Suppose one parent is bread maker, the breadwinner, the provider, the go to sleep, go back to work parent, and yeah, boy, do what your mama say or do what your dad say. I don't know if fairness would be equal punishment for each parent. I would like to know the extent of involvement with the parent, with the child. Is there a controlling parent? Is there a disciplinary parent? Or is it like in a lot of households, parents are not equally responsible for the child raising and behavior. So I don't think it would be justice to say, well, if we give one 15 years or 10 years or whatever, other ones should get the same. We still have the responsibility as court to administer justice, to see who is this person sentencing and what would be fair to society and to this person in the sentence that I give. So I just don't know the degree of liability or responsibility of each parent in this case. I'll submit it with that. I'm not going to quiver with you about the length of the sentence, because I think that's going to depend upon the judge and all of the factors that come to light. You know, when I was 14 and 15 years old and my curfew was 10 o'clock on the weekends, I detected that I can raise the window. I come home at 9:55. Good night, everybody. And I go out at 10:05 and sneak back in that same window at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning. So I think a lot of facts have to be looked at.
Okay, let's take one quick caller, then we'll come back. Hey, caller, you got a question about downtown shooting curfew laws?
Yes, I do, Brother Nate and Mr. Attorney Grant. I don't know if Attorney Banks is with us, but whoever he is, thank you for taking my call. Couple things. I'd like to leave first if Attorney Banks is with us. The report just came out in Chicago, Attorney Grimes and Lee. The report just came out Thursday, the 4th, in Chicago, that Chicago police is still disproportionately stopping Black and Latino drivers. I looked up the demographics of Chicago, being born and raised in that area in Gary, but I know the area well. My cousin was Ralph Metcalf. I know you all know who Ralph Metcalf is. That's my blood relative. So Chicago's 33% white, 28% Black, 17% has Latino. The Census Bureau says white, Hispanic, Latino, 10% Asian, everything else mixed. So I don't understand why we're still seeing these disproportionate numbers. So that leads me to this curfew issue that I listened to Tina Cosby and James Patterson, who are journalists here, Attorney Grimes. I listened to a bunch of calls yesterday here, Attorney Grimes, about this issue. And I'm telling you, these Black folks here, Attorney Grimes, sound just like the 1994 crime bill, Black people. They sound even worse. Because my thing is this: I coach 3 sports at TAB Recreational, which is one of the largest sports programs here in the city of Indianapolis. And I've got a 5th grade girl right now, 2 of them, who, if you look at them, you don't know if they're 16 or if they're 12. You can't tell. So how are you going to differentiate when the state law says, Attorney Grimes, the state law says a 15-year-old has to be home by 11 on Fridays and Saturdays, just dealing with Fridays and Saturdays, or Friday, Saturday. But 16 and 17, under 15 has to be home by 11. But 15 and 17 got to be home by 1. So how are you going to differentiate who's 15 to 17, and it's not 1 o'clock? Are you going to pull them all over and say, show me your papers? Is that what's going to happen, Attorney Lee? How are you going to differentiate that age bracket? I heard no one bring that up. And number 2, going back to the Chicago case, I don't like this racial profile. We know this is a problem. We know we have the evidence. We cannot sit up and say we don't have this evidence. We know we get racially profiled. So I sent a tweet to the mayor and the chief. We want to see the data, 3-6 months on the racial makeup of the people that you're either citing for curfew or that you're taking down to juvenile. They blew that off the other day. Matter of fact, Tina Conrad nurse said, well, I know we're going to hear that they're getting Black and brown, but They just blew it off like it's nothing. And callers calling them out, well, it's just all Black folks and it's just Black people. It was horrible, Attorney Grimes. It was horrible. I've been all over the country and all over the world. I've never heard Black people talk against Black people the way they do here. They are horrible. So I agree with a curfew, but we got to make sure implementation is right. Because I was just out south, Attorney Lee, last week, and they're speeding, they're dragging on Madison Avenue, they hanging out all over there by Hannah and Epler. They all out over there, white folks. So let's see how they implement and how they apply these rules. where they're not disproportionately affecting us. And you guys know we have the evidence. We know. But what I'm shameful is the people here who don't look out for the citizens, the liberties of everybody, because I'll leave with this. Ben Franklin said, for those that choose security over liberty, they deserve neither. Thanks for taking my point.
You know, I thought we had made a step forward here in LA when the retired police chief Michael Moore said he is against racial profiling. He will not support his officers in making racial profile stops, that you got to stop, you have to stop stopping brown and black young men when they're walking down the street minding their business because you think that they could be going into some criminal conduct if there's no articulable facts indicating that they are involved in any criminal conduct. I go, wow, we finally come into the 21st century. But the officers don't seem to understand what the chief was saying because they still make racial profile stops and detentions and detaining young men of color. So I'm asking, I have a couple of cases involving those racial profile stops. I'm asking, well, what's the consequences? The judges act like they've never heard of the police chief new policy or new practice because it's not the quote written law. So we've done a lot of lip service to this issue that this is wrong and we shouldn't stop a young man because of the color of his skin. Maybe 1 out of 10 stops we get a hit on somebody having a weapon, but the other 9 people have been inconvenienced, held for hours, etc. So is this Pierre that was talking?
No.
Am I wrong about? Okay, anyway, until we get better training of officers and understanding of what the Constitution means and what the law really is, I don't see this problem going away. The killing of young African American and brown young men. It's been a lot of lip service, like I said, but we still got the situation.
Since stop and frisk was ended in Chicago, we've seen the number of traffic stops skyrocket. And we also saw, based on the report that the caller stated, and it's no surprise that Black drivers are disproportionately pulled over. And it's unacceptable. Disproportionately, Black drivers, they end up being handcuffed while their vehicle is being searched.
Mm-hmm.
When they are Black and driving in Chicago. And although there is a stated policy, to your point, Attorney Grimes, that fair and constitutional policing is the foundation of the Chicago Public Police Department's efforts to strengthen public safety and trust, and that officers only conduct traffic stops when they have probable cause, the facts show this disproportionate impact on African American drivers. It still persists.
Right.
Well, one of the issues that he raised has to do with the age of the children. Here's my position. I want to make it real clear. I understand the caller's frustration. I've seen it firsthand. When I started working, I became vice president of the NAACP here locally back in the 80s. The Marion County Jail had 1,200 inmates. 1,148 was African-American males. There were 9% of the population, but 95% of people incarcerated. So it's been a long process to try to fix the problem. We've not fixed the problem, but we've made some improvement. The issue, though, that really present in our city is that we have a proliferation of homicide by African-American males against other African-American males. And one of the problems we have is that we have a lot of teen violence. And how do you address teen violence? And what are the steps proactively that we must engage in order to reduce this? None of us want our kids to go out in the community to be unsafe. And so the question is, how do we go about fixing the problem? Here's what I suggested. Parents got to be parents. We can't allow our kids to go out and buy guns. We can't let our kids go out in the middle of the night unsupervised. So you have these babies, 11, 12 years old, out downtown at 11:30, 12 o'clock at night. I don't think that's acceptable. Now, there are some circumstances that you discussed early on. You have a single parent who has to work 2, 3 jobs to make ends meet. They work in the third shift. Their kids sneak out at night. That parent, in my view, is not liable for negligence because they're doing necessities of paying the bills. You contrast that to a parent who dropped their kid off downtown and go to a bar or something. That's the different scenarios. Civilly, we've always sued parents for teenage liability, particularly like when they're driving a car. When parents have their vehicles, their kids get a learner's permit, they go out and have a wreck, we sue the parent too, because the parents are also liable because they have to sign for the license. So they're equally liable for the acts of the kids. So the point is that we have to have parents become better parents. In that regard, they need to make sure that they try to ensure the safety of other people's kids. And so I think that, like counsel talked about the Michigan case, that was an extraordinary case in terms of where the parents became criminally liable. But make no mistakes, I've always held parents civilly liable for misconduct of their kids and when they were negligent. Like, for example, if your kids use your gun to go out and shoot and kill somebody, if your gun was safely secured, you follow all the protocol. And we had talked about on one of our earlier shows, SWAT. SWAT with Daniel Harrison, Sergeant Hondo, when he came home from work, they showed meticulously how he put his gun up. And I brought it out on the show, and 2 days later in the paper, they had a story about that same thing, that the movie theaters and the people producing these shows now have decided that they must also include safety tips in their movies, in their television shows. I thought it was a brilliant idea. So the point I'm making is that he showed you how you must put your gun up. He took the gun, put the safety on, put in a lock thing, combination, bam. So the kids can't get in there because it's a lock into a vault. And so if somehow the kid could figure out the combination and stole the gun, in that case, the parent still would not be liable because he's done all, in my opinion. But on the other hand, if you leave it on the kitchen table, then he's liable. Yeah. Now,
I agree with you, Attorney Lee, that these cases are very, very fact specific, and that the Michigan case is the first case that actually held parents criminally responsible for the actions of their child. In the aftermath of the Highland Park mass shooting, the parent that signed for the gun of the shooter, he took a plea in that case here in Lake County and received a 60-day sentence and was released early for good behavior.
wow. And that was,
But he was only charged with 7 counts of misdemeanor reckless conduct, 1 for each of the victims. of his son's carnage on July 4th, 2 years ago.
And didn't that same guy also had ran for mayor of that city?
Absolutely, years earlier, the father of the mass shooter had run for mayor of Highland Park.
And so that was the limit, apparently under Illinois law, I guess, that they could charge him with in that case.
I don't know that that's the case, but those were the charges that were filed by the prosecutor in the case.
I was horrified when I saw that mass killing in that town over 4th of July. It was a terrible sight to see. Just went out and just started shooting people indiscriminately. Children, men, women, didn't matter. Just
during the parade.
Yeah, just started shooting. I wasn't a big proponent of the death penalty, but I said if there's ever a case, that guy certainly deserves it.
Nate, I hate to disagree with you to a degree, but I got to put my opinion forward regarding the secure lock that you're talking about. I once heard or read or somehow or another in my mind there's a statement, well, regardless of the statement, but the internet now teaches you how to make bombs, teaches you how to make guns. Young people, old people, whoever want to learn how to make that stuff, teaches you how to make explosives, all kinds of things that may be illegal for one to possess. You can find ways on the internet to produce and make those items. As to a lock, I don't know of any secure lock, especially that you can put on a safe for a gun or anything else that person can't break if they want to. Locks, I've heard once, I do remember this, they are to keep our honest people. Dishonest people are people who want to get at what's behind that lock. They can take a hammer and a chisel or anything else or a picket, they can get behind that lock. So I don't know that necessarily the secure locking that the guy on the movie you're talking about, on the SWAT movie, I'm sure that lock could be picked if a person had enough time to pick that lock off of that container holding that weapon. I remember having a little portable safe. My friend had a little portable safe and she had locked her ID and keys in there and she couldn't find the key to the lock. It wasn't a combination. And so I said, well, call the handyman. She called the handyman, he came over, and before we could get off the phone, he had opened that little safe. And it was one of those thick, heavy, fireproof safes. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. I just don't know. Possession of the weapon is the problem. And locking it up, yeah, you can keep a baby out of it probably, but a good 16, 15, 14-year-old kid who want to get in there, I think they can get through that lock. That's all I'm saying.
That's a very good point. But I think that's an excellent point that we can't probably have any security system that can't probably be hacked.
Right.
Department of Defense, CIA, they've all been hacked by computers. So I agree with that. But what it does, though, it protects you from civil liability and criminal liability. If you take the proactive step to try to keep your weapon in a safe place versus leave it on the kitchen table for your kids to walk out with bullets. I mean, I think that you're inviting misconduct. On the other hand, a person have to actually have some significant knowledge in order to hack or pick the lock. So that's a good point.
I got you.
Okay, let's
I
go.
got you, but the person that's harmed or killed, it don't make a difference to them whether it was locked or secured behind 10 locks. They still suffered a harm by this weapon.
I understand that.
You know,
And I think these cases, again, are very, very fact specific. I think the Michigan case, very egregious and frankly, equally so the Highland Park situation. And I think the question becomes whether or not the individual exercised reasonable care in securing the weapon.
Good point.
Again, these cases very fact specific.
Okay, Pierre Pullen, you got a question coming about this issue today, sir?
Here's Pierre.
Oh, hey, can you hear me, Nate?
Yes, sir.
Oh, good morning, everybody.
Good,
I heard the
good morning.
show yesterday. I heard the show yesterday on our local community connection, and I understand Imhotep's point. A lot of our kids are going to get profiled, but then you can't get away from the escapable fact downtown. It's just a lot of black youth down there shooting each other and being involved in mess. My solution and the callers were just frustrated because it always seems that it's our kids, that it's black kids. So I would, and you're not going to be able to pick, like Imhotep said, you got 15-year-olds that stand 6 feet tall. You're not going to be able to, and a lot of teenagers don't even carry ID. So the only thing I would suggest that the city do is what a lot of cities do, and that's just, you're just going to have to put on those weekend nights or nights that we have big events in town, you're just going to have a lot of beat cops walking around downtown in those areas. And when a cop is dealing with a kid or something, or dealing with a situation, you can stand back and film. But what we don't need is a bunch of people getting up in the cop's face asking them, why are you doing this to that kid, or what? That's really unproductive. But what I wanted to ask you, Nate, because I got a question for you, Milton, and Vanita. I wanted you to address this situation where these cops have asked this judge to resign because of his ruling in that cop killer, that cop that was killed, Breonna Lee. What I wanted to ask you, Milton, was about the settlement between the LA Sheriff's Department and the DOJ out there. And Vanita, I wanted you to give us an update on the mayor of the small town. Did she win her election? And what's the status of the investigation on her? And I'll take it all off the air. Thank you for taking my call, guys.
I need a clarification, Pierre, as to the settlement between the Sheriff Department and the DOJ. Specifically, what are you talking about?
It's in the LA Times today or yesterday. It's the Sheriff's Department was having a lot of problems out there. And
with the gang? What?
Well, they had that, it was an investigation. They had that sheriff's gangs inside of the
yes,
sheriff's
several of them.
Department.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was outrageous. And the story just basically said that there was some sort of resolution or some settlement coming up, and I was interested to hear if you knew any more about it.
I missed it, Pierre.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's in the LA. It's in the LA.
I understand they got about 8 different gangs in the Sheriff Department that's been revealed, and some of the sheriff upper echelon think that it's okay, but I'm just not familiar with the settlement. I'm sorry.
And to be clear, those are
wait a second. Hey, Pierre.
Top gangs.
Hey, Pierre. Yeah. They said the case is finally headed toward a sprawling settlement agreement that also include jail condition, deputy gains, and staff. And so apparently the settlement agreement has not been finalized yet. And they're still working on some of the details. Because settlements usually involve payment of money. And so Well, I don't think that they finalized that yet, at least based on the news broadcast.
I thank you.
So
Okay.
they may have had a mediation or something, and and a lot of times you don't see the final agreement sometime between 2 to 6 weeks later. And so when that get finalized, then we could probably discuss it at that time. But that first thing that I forgot about the first issue. You said about the I think
Cops here that has
her name was Lee, Patrolman Lee, that was Brianna, that was murdered by the guy. He shot through the door or something. Is that right?
Yeah, and then he pled mental defect or something like that, and they decided not to pursue the death penalty. And whatever happened, he got such a sentence that the police union said, that judge needs to resign. And that's, you don't hear about cops asking for the judge to just give it up like that much time. But I think it was Stoner.
I don't see how the death penalty would have been involved.
Let me explain something to you. Let's make some real clear. Last fall, in 3.5 months, police officers shot and killed 18 African Americans. 18 was shot and killed. They shot one guy in the back, unarmed, that had committed no crime. They shot a guy in the tree. So
the tree.
But the point I'm making is, it's inappropriate, in my opinion, for this police union who support police officers, no matter what type of crime they commit, for them to say the judge engaged in misconduct. Every case is fact sensitive. Evidence is presented before a judge on both sides of the case. And without knowing the evidence, like, for example, in his case, there may be one or more psychiatric evaluations. The state would have hired experts. The expert could have said, based on their view, this guy has such a mental defect, he lacked the ability to know right from wrong. He was delusional, whatever. I don't know, but crimes requires, as a general rule, you be reckless or you intentionally intended to commit the crime. So I don't know what was the motivation or the evidence that the judge saw or the judge heard or the judge made a decision on. But I do know this, that it's inappropriate for the police union to criticize any judicial official with the fact that they themselves could be viewed as a crime syndicate themselves. This same union supported, go back, historically, they supported segregation within the department. So I have no respect for their opinion at all. At all. I want to make that clear. And so I do have a great deal of respect for our judiciary. And as a general rule, our judges in this county work hard every day to try to uphold the law and the rules. And when I disagree, we do an appeal.
Well, Nate, you got a union that has a great deal of power and money. And I think them speaking out like that may be, in the long run, a deterrent effect upon further judicial opinions and rulings in their mind, because a lot of political candidates and officials take a lot of money from this police union or these police unions across this country. They get millions of dollars during the election year in their campaign. These unions have a lot of force, have a lot of impact, and a lot of threat against our justice system, sadly enough.
In Indianapolis, that's a good point. In Indianapolis, they don't. This same union, who has a lot of money, they supported in the prosecutor race last time an attorney who had never tried a criminal case. So they endorse as the prosecutor, this union endorsed a candidate who had never, ever tried a criminal case to be in charge of 200 trial lawyers who are trying cases every day. So
like a baseball player who comes up the bat. He may only hit 300 or 400, but he's a good hitter. So they don't win them all. But I'm just saying it's a recognized political force, at least in California.
not here, because
Okay.
they got a big losing streak.
Okay.
The people they endorse, they're losers. They endorse a mayor candidate who spent about $16 million. You know, I don't get it, but it was sad for a police officer to be shot and killed. It was, you know, I was saddened by that. And
Yeah.
I thought that the person who did that should receive a severe punishment. Make no mistake about it.
I guess I'm not saying that they win and everything, but they demand and command attention with their
They do.
money and influence. Okay.
They do.
Yeah.
And but in any event, and I don't know what the third issue was that Pierre raised for Vanita. I don't remember it.
He raised the issue regarding Dalton, Illinois Mayor Tiffany Henyard, and the latest development is that the legal counsel and trustees of Dalton, they are seeking to hire former mayor of Chicago, Lori Lightfoot, who's a former prosecutor as well, to investigate the allegations of corruption, reckless spending, financial improprieties that are being asserted against the mayor of Dalton. And it's my understanding that the FBI is reportedly also investigating these allegations as well. So the village of Dalton will be having a meeting next week in order to vote on whether to hire former Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot at a rate of $400 per hour to investigate the case.
Wow. Go ahead, Milton.
Curiously, when Vanita said that, it reminded me of an issue that we may or may not have any information on, and that is, what is the community position regarding the judge's ruling in the Miss Fanny situation down in Georgia? Do we know?
I didn't get a consensus on that yet.
Okay.
I'll call somebody this weekend, get a consensus, because I don't remember.
I was wondering if that judge is in trouble or anything, from which side or the other.
Well, I thought the judge made some terrible rulings in this regard. He got an allegation without evidence of prosecutorial misconduct. He has a televised evidentiary hearing on something that should have been done with a motion and made a ruling. They never produced evidence to support their allegation, so it should have been dismissed on their face. The fact remains is that you could dig deep enough and you could do an investigation on anybody and make them look really bad. But
am I still on the radio?
Yes, go ahead.
Hey, Nate, here's some information for you. I didn't know I was still on the radio, but here's some information for you. Rashad Ritchie, who's a radio host down there in Atlanta, said that the judge in Fonny's case went to a get-together or some sort of meeting. The governor was there. And he thought that that might be some kind of conflict of interest because the governor at some point may be called as a witness or something in the case or whatever. And what do y'all think about that? If
It's not a conflict.
actually...
Hey, Pierre, Here, that's not a conflict. I mean,
That's
we
not-
have conferences with judges and lawyers all the time, and just the fact that you see them at a social event doesn't really mean anything, because that
Gotta get
same
more-
judge you see at the social event
What if-
will rule against you in your next trial.
No, if the judge, if the governor was going to be a witness in that case at some point, and they're meeting or they're talking or could that have been a conflict? Because he reported it on the radio as if it was a potential conflict. Now that's from somebody that lives and works down in Atlanta and is on the radio and does a lot of law work. But he's
Well,
not a lawyer.
that's an interesting report, Pierre, but I think we would need a little bit more than that in order to argue that it's a potential conflict.
Okay, I'm gone. Thank you.
Okay.
Attorney Lee, as
Yes.
we're discussing the shootings in downtown Indianapolis and the youth involvement, what is happening holistically in Indianapolis to invest in our youth? You had mentioned a summer youth program where employers were actually being paid to hire students.
Yes,
As one
Indianapolis-
initiative, I'm sure this is a big problem. And so we need to address the root causes of young people hanging out downtown, violating curfew. But what are some of the things that are happening to steer youth in Indianapolis in a positive way?
Well, we might know, that's a very good point. This event we have our student spring break, and I forgot to mention that. And so a lot of kids, some schools are 1 week, some are 2 weeks. So you have a lot of kids with a lot of free time on their hand during their spring break. But in Indianapolis, the city of Indianapolis have a summer job program that was started originally by the Black churches here. And I would contribute to that each year. And then the mayor took over, and so they hire a number of kids. But then the state has a program now, I need to alert everybody, it's called EARN, E-A-R-N. And it's Indiana Work Study Program. In essence, EARN mean Employment Aid Readiness Network. It's an experimental learning internship program administered by the Indiana Commission for Higher Education. What it amounts to is that an employer in Indiana this year could actually get enrolled in this program, and if they didn't have the money to pay for these kids to work, the state will pay all a part of their salaries. And the idea is that we're trying first to have more students go to college, and secondly, we're trying to reduce crime. And third, we're trying to have the kids who have potential, instead of leaving the state of Indiana, stay in the state and help the state grow. So it's the program called EARN, and they can go on the website. If you're a potential employer, it's just EARN, E-A-R-N, so Indiana Work Study Program, Indiana. And you can go on the website and you can apply for the program, particularly if you're a small employer. Say you are a small employer, could only afford 1 or 2. Well, this is an excellent opportunity for you to register and obtain proceeds to pay for your summer help this year. So I urge you, particularly if you're a small, and that include any employer. In other words, you can apply, and you can look at. It's got about an 8-page criteria that shows you all the eligibility requirement. And it tells you the work time period, and the minimum amount is 12 hours a week up to 40 hours a week, and start April 27th up until August the 15th of this year. And so make sure that you go on the website, and that's just one item that we will have as additional tool to help many of our young folks earn a living and also stay out of trouble and also develop a career? Thanks for asking that question. I've forgotten about it. But moving forward, we had the Dobbs decision, Attorney Banks and Grimes, that basically overruled and voided Roe versus Wade. And this has led to a deluge of litigation and laws all over the country that they're taking away women's rights of choice. And so this week, the Florida Supreme Court issued an exhaustive 100+ page opinion on whether or not they could place on the ballot this November a state amendment to the Constitution that will allow women to have a choice. And the law that will be on the Constitution by the Supreme Court of Florida states as follows. On the ballot, no law shall prohibit, penalize, delay, or restrict abortion before viability or when necessary to protect the patient's health as determined by the patient healthcare provider. This amendment does not change the legislator's constitutional authority to require notification to a parent or a guardian before a minor has an abortion. And so the caveat to this ballot initiative is not majority rule, yet they have to have 60% of the people that vote in the election have to vote in favor of this amendment. The problem, the reason they use 60% is the poll numbers say that 58% of Floridians support this law. And so the legislators got smart and say, okay, we'll make it a barrier too tall to climb. And so we'll see whether or not that occurs. But the opinion counselor was exhaustive. They went through the entire history, and it's an advisory opinion. It's an advisory opinion that the state did, and because they have a Republican, Supreme Court, and apparently they thought that they can keep this off of the election ballot, even though it's part of the state constitution to do so. So in any event, they cleared it up, and so now we'll have the right of the citizen to vote on this initiative. Now, the net result of this means that Florida now, which since Obama has voted Republican, the Democrats now have a realistic chance now to put Florida back in play. Despite the fact that the Biden administration had put billions of dollars in Florida that really have pushed forward their economy by building their highways or bridges, giving money to the unemployed through federal legislation, and reducing their medical costs, getting rid of student loans. They have a lot of students down there that had their loans forgiven. There was a whole litany of things. Also, the way that COVID was handled. Florida had probably the third highest amount of people die because of COVID, and their governor apparently had least restrictive laws, and they camouflaged a massive amount of death. So you have a lot of issues like that. And so we'll like to see whether or not this initiative passed in Florida. I sure hope that it does, Counselor.
Yes, the Florida Supreme Court, in two rulings, as Attorney Lee has summarized, upheld the state's right to prohibit abortion and upheld a 6-week ban, which becomes effective on May 1st. And so this near total ban will block virtually all access to reproductive health care in the South, not just Florida, because Florida is surrounded by several other states that have already implemented a 6-week or total ban. And so a woman would have to go to South Carolina is one of the closest state, and or Virginia, which is like a 11 to 14 hour car ride in order to seek an abortion. And at 6 weeks, many women have no idea that they are even pregnant. And so in Florida, there were 84,000 abortions performed in 2023, and that is 1 in 12 of all abortions nationwide. So this is the other side to this, however, is, as you stated, Attorney Lee, in a 4-3 vote, the court approved a ballot initiative which would overturn the 6-week ban and would permit broad access to abortion in the state's constitution. But between now and November, women's lives are at risk. And particularly, there's, as we know, a disproportionate impact on African-American women and women of color.
If the vote comes back at 59%, that means we don't have an amendment that you're talking about, Nathaniel? It's got to be 60% of the vote.
60%.
So that seems to be awful gamesmanship here. I mean, we got 60% of the people that support it, supposedly. So now we're going to put it right there at that line. If you don't get 60% of the voters supporting it, we go back to square one. That is this prohibition on abortion, right?
That's correct. See, because the
And
poll
so
numbers say
what
that,
would be what is the typical, I'm sorry to cut you off there, but what is the usual percentage to get a law passed with the vote? 51% or 50.001?
that's
I don't
correct.
know, I'm asking. So
Generally,
why do we have to deal with a higher standard? It seems like it's illegal to raise it to 60%. That's all I'm saying.
Abortion rights will be front and center in Florida and in many states across the nation in November.
What do you think about that percentage, Vanita?
Well, what I think is that I want to look at the percentages across the states that have passed similar referendums. I think that some of them do exceed 50%. And let me just say this, the potential good news is that in all of the states where there have been this type of referendum on the ballot, that pro-choice advocates have prevailed. So there's 7 states, including Kansas, Michigan, and several others, where these types of referendums were passed. And I just have to take a closer look, Attorney Grimes, at what the required percentages were in terms of numbers of voters.
well,
Okay, I'm just curious.
I wish and I hope and pray that this 19th Amendment is, when it was added, what was that, back in 1921, or I can't remember the year, but it has meant a lot to our nation, particularly as to the rights of women and also minorities. The rollback of women's rights is not a small deal, because now in our state, I see open racist advertising for governor in our state. And I'm going to get somebody to talk about that, because I'm sick of waking up every morning. They rolled back women's rights, and now they've been attacking diversity. And then one candidate for governor now, he's saying that the other candidate should not be elected governor because he supported Black Lives Matter. And he said, for law and order and Black Lives Matter cop killer, just a racist commercial. And the point is that these laws, although they say conservative laws, are going a little bit further than being conservative. They actually are abrogating the rights of folks and minorities. So stay tuned. We'll talk about it in more detail next week. We're at the end of our show. Got any closing comments?
Go out and vote, please.
Attorney Banks?
I'm echoing, as we often do, Attorney Grimes' sentiment today that voting matters.
The views and opinions expressed on Legally Speaking are not necessarily those of Raise AM 1310.
Thank you very much.
95.1.
Have a good day, everyone.
Radio
Have a great day.
for its
Right.
management.